Everybody from Bogota, Colombia. Actually, yes, and we're very pleased to be a member of Ally Law since 6 weeks ago, like Wendy said. Before we joined the Ally Law membership, we were very focused on the local market, and my previous experience came from Denton's here in Colombia. So I think this is a great opportunity in order to take advantage and build a strong synergy within all the Allied Law members, because there is a lot of things that we can do together. Mhm.
Great, thank you. Denton's is one of the few Magic Circle firms that has adopted a network strategy rather than an acquisition strategy for their locations outside of Europe. So it's interesting that Pablo comes from a super network environment. Next, I'd like to introduce Bronwyn, who is the marketing and business development consultant with Ally Law's Brisbane firm, Tyne McCartney. And Bronwyn, give us a sentence or two about how you found yourself at your current firm.
Certainly. Thanks, Wendy, and thanks everybody for joining today. I started my life as a lawyer here in Queensland, and then moved myself to Hong Kong, where I spent 12 years. And while I was there about 15 years ago, I took on a practice development role with White & Case and worked across the Asian offices. And so made a move into management, and it's something I've loved doing. But my focus is on helping clients and lawyers build their businesses through growth initiatives and client development programs.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Catriona, who is with Russell Kennedy in Melbourne. And Catriona, what were you doing before Russell Kennedy?
Thanks, Wendy. I've been working in law firms for about 20 years now in marketing and business development roles. I've worked for national firms in Australia. Clayton Utz and King & Wood Mallisons. I also worked in Singapore for Allen & Overy, and I've also worked for a couple of mid-tier Australian firms as well. So I've got a Master's in Communications and a business degree, and actually started out in sports management with the Australian Open tennis. So I've made a pretty big shift moving into law firms.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. So to get started, let me pose this question to our panelists. Certainly the pandemic has changed many things within law firms, and I think probably marketing and business development as well. When you think about what you were doing a year ago this time versus what you're doing now, how has the pandemic changed what your firm is doing in marketing and BD? And with that change, maybe you could give me an example of something that's worked well in this new environment. And maybe we'll ask Bronwyn to go first on this.
Sure. Look, I should start out by saying the impact here of the pandemic and COVID-19 has not been as severe as it has elsewhere. And for this, we're very grateful, but we also recognise that that's a changing proposition from day to day. We did go into a 6-week lockdown earlier in the year, and it meant we had to rethink our approach. And so one of the things we did very quickly was move online. We made sure we had content online for clients to access. We also created videos that would have been in-person workshops, and we moved to webinars. But I think the key thing we did very quickly was adopt how do we help our clients through this approach? And we tried to take that mindset to all the lawyers and talk through where we couldn't meet in person. We knew from personal experience people were getting bombarded by emails, so we made a conscious effort to use the telephone more. We went back to the future, so to speak, to call clients more regularly and have direct conversations with them. And in line with that, we did work around having effective conversations in difficult times, because we wanted to ensure that clients were getting value when we were talking to them. And it included how we check in with them and how they wanted us to keep in touch through that time. And I think the proposition was always, let's work out how we get through this together as best we can.
Great, thank you. Pablo, same question. What changed from a year ago, and what's an example of something that's worked well in the new environment?
Well, we have here two examples that I would like to share with you. The first one is that we saw a very big opportunity with turnaround services. We made an alliance with a financial consulting firm, and we started to approach different clients that could be having difficulties because of the pandemic, everything related with insolvency and restructuring. We were providing different alternatives for them in order for the business to keep on functioning. So that's something that we started to do like from 2 months ago, and we are working on that part. This turnaround services is something that it's gaining a lot of strength here in Colombia. So, and we, within 2 other firms in Colombia, we are the first ones to provide this type of servicing to different clients. So that's something that really helped us in MVP activities. And the other one that I would like to share is that CCG lawyers, they didn't really communicate way too much all the practice areas that we have within inside the firm. So basically, okay, we have corporate and M&A, but we also do data privacy. We also have insolvency. Before, insolvency and restructuring was within corporate and M&A, but we separated. So we started to promote everything that we really do, because the firm was a small firm, and we want to get bigger, and we want to go into the international market. So in order to do that, we have to promote everything that we do in a clear way.
Great, thank you. And Catriona, same question.
We have, as Bronwyn mentioned, moved a lot of our BD engagement online through webinars and videos and better utilisation of social media. And so early on, we did a session with lawyers to help them get their social media profiles, make them clear and make them stand out. We briefed them on the different online forums and different ways to connect with their peers and their industry sectors online. We also reiterated some of the really fundamental principles of communication around thinking about the purpose of why you're communicating with someone and structuring that conversation and your key messages and the language that you're using as well. Online, by phone, it can be a bit more difficult to read people's responses, and so it can take a bit of extra preparation. And also just reiterating the follow-up and the next steps. And a really positive example of where we've been able to increase our engagement with the firm's broader audience is in webinars. When we, in the Melbourne office in particular, we've got capacity for about 110 people theatre style for a seminar. Some of our webinars have had over 350 people attending. So we intend to, once we are back in the office and back operating from that perspective, we intend to keep that online streaming function with all of our events. That way we can reach a broader audience. We do a lot of local council work, so we work with clients all over our state, and it makes our content and our people a lot more accessible to them.
Great, great. Let me ask this. Part of this learning how to do webinars effectively, or probably selling turnaround services, those kinds of things, the rules of engagement have changed. It's not the same way that it always was. Maybe you can comment on some examples of best practices now in this environment that you've encouraged with your groups inside the firm to really be at their best for marketing in this time. What kinds of things have you stressed are best practices, or things that maybe might not be top of mind for those of us that are on this session?
Well, I'm happy to take this one, Wendy. what we've asked people to consider things like their background, and we've actually produced a Russell Kennedy branded background that people can access. And unfortunately, not everyone at Russell Kennedy, depending on the strength of their internet and the technology that they're using from home, can use that. But when partners are presenting, they can have the RK logo in the background. As prior to this session, we get them to think about what they're wearing in the session, making sure that they're in a quiet space to try and reduce the interruptions. The professional photo for when they're walking, if they need to walk away from their screen. Also just thinking about the functionality of some of the technology. Russell Kennedy has the events module for Zoom, and so we can capture all of the questions, attendees, and we're doing really rigorous follow-up after the events. And one example was when we were doing a session for local government, we had someone from a council we don't currently work for who attended, gave feedback and asked questions. So we were able to follow up with him after the session, and he's now invited us to tender for work for them. So we're really making sure that we have a full understanding of the way the technology works and how we can use it to create go from a webinar being marketing, we're talking to many people, how can we turn that into the one-on-one, face-to-face, essentially, conversation?
That's great. Bronwyn, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, look, I think the other thing that the technology has done, and it's made law much more personal again and brought the humanity back into it, because we're all at home struggling with different challenges that we might not have faced in the office. So it's given us a permission to sort of check in a bit more and see how people are doing in the client relationships. And certainly, we found connectors that we might not have found in an office environment, where someone comes in specifically for a meeting, we sit in a meeting room and they leave. We've suddenly seen people grappling with new technology, working in a juggling homeschooling, trying to find scarce products on the supermarket shelves. And also the other thing I think is learning the universal language for you're on mute during Zoom conferences. These experiences have all reminded us, that we're all in this together. We're all human beings and people trying to get through this as best we can. And that's seen stronger relationships emerge in most cases.
Very good. Anything to add, Pablo, on this point?
Yes, actually. For us, we work with 3 sectors that are very struggling right now with the pandemic: restaurants, airlines, and travel agency. We have a lot of clients from those 3 sectors. And basically what we have done with them is to show them a constant support. For example, with the airlines, we have worked a lot of them, but we have an agreement of 0 billing for a certain amount of time. And we're trying to show our clients that we are with them in the good times and in the bad times. And also during the pandemic, we became members of Ally Law, which is a really big opportunity for us, taking into account that we want to go into the international market. I've seen the power of referrals in different at my previous work. So I'm totally convinced that we can gain a lot of synergy within the firms, within members of Ally, to gain power within different sectors, for example, private equity funds, or we can go into different if we want to go for international deals that are related with oil and gas, or mergers and acquisitions and everything. This is a pivot for us, and being here with you guys is totally a pivot for us, because it's an open door, and Colombia is a place where we have huge opportunities, and other countries also have different opportunities that would like to have some Colombian income to go over there. So it's an open door, and we have to take advantage of it.
Great, thank you. So I'm aware that it's true on this session and true on many of sessions that we have this week, that we have first-time Ally Law meeting attendees, and we have many younger lawyers not just the two main delegates or the practice leaders. So I wanted to ask if, let's say I'm a four-year lawyer, I'm a bit of an introvert, and I'm wondering, what can I do in this environment that makes sense for me as someone who wants to start doing marketing and has an interest in business development? If I came and sat down in your office or called you on Zoom and said, what would you suggest to me in this current environment? What kind of advice could you give me? Whoever wants to go first, just jump right in.
I'm happy to jump in here. One of the things that I would say is, regardless of whether we're in the middle of a pandemic, I always stress to lawyers that they need to work to their strengths and perhaps work on areas. I'm not going to ask a lawyer who's not comfortable presenting to go and stand in front of a room of 500 people. I will certainly encourage them to do activities that they're confident in doing and that that they think are going to connect in with clients. During this time, we've encouraged our people to connect in with the industry associations that they might be involved with. We've got a strong aged care practice, and so we've been very involved with one of the aged care membership-based organisations, industry associations in Australia. We've done some joint presentations with them. We've attended their presentations. We share articles that our people have written, and I know a lot of that's one way of people demonstrating their knowledge out in the market without feeling too exposed, is writing articles. We also make sure that whenever we share an article through our client relationship management database, we share it on social media, we send it around to our people, and we get them to then share it with their networks. And I know Ally Law are very proactive in sharing our content where appropriate as well. We've also talked about, worked with them around special interest groups and connecting into different conversations that are happening, whether it be via LinkedIn or via their industry associations. And even just participating in our webinars to see who is attending them, the sorts of questions that are being asked that they can then take back to their clients offline and start that conversation directly with them.
Great suggestions. Bronwyn.
Well, I would take a slightly different approach. My background is very much the client development piece. So I would sit with them and say, well, look, who's in your network? And while lawyers tend to revert and prefer the written word, of course they do, they're wordsmiths and they're very good at it. In this day and age, we need our networks, and it's something that I wish I'd known 10 years ago, that the skills, the value I have, the most valuable assets in my career now are my skills and my network. And without the network, the skills piece has a limited audience. So I would do work with that lawyer that was sitting opposite me about how we're going to build their network and their client relationship skills. And, you know, like sporting skills, some people, this comes naturally to some people, and other people have to work at it. And I'm one of those people that had to work at it. You know, there is nothing I like less than walking into a crowded room, whether it's people I know or people I don't know. I kind of have to take a big, deep breath and go in. And I find that if I do that and I have an outcome in mind when I go in, then I can do that. But the thing is, the more you work at this and the more you do it, you find what your own strategies and comfort zones are, and you become better at it. And the earlier you start that in your career, the easier it is as you go on. So I think it's important to have a balanced focus, both across the marketing initiatives that Catriona spoke to, but also developing the client relationships and developing that network that you take with you through your career.
So I'm going to come back and ask for some examples of how do you develop that network. But before I get to that, let me ask Pablo for his comments. A 3 or 4 year lawyer comes and sits in front of you and says, help. What do I do? I know I should be developing a network. I know I should be doing marketing. Where do I start? What kinds of advice would you give them in this environment?
Well, first of all, if you are a 3 or 4 year lawyer, the first thing that I would tell him is, or tell her, sorry, is that please make sure that you're working at the field of law that you really like. For example, if you like banking and finance, work with the party that is in the head of banking and finance, and start learning from him, because probably the partner that is in charge of banking and finance could be a rainmaker, and if he's a rainmaker, that's the best example that a young lawyer can have. Work hand by hand with them. Start showing your work, make him invite you to the meetings, make him invite you to the different events. If he's a speaker, be with him. There's a saying that I'm going to translate it from Spanish to English, is that always be right next to the people that you can learn from. So that would be the advice that I would give.
That's great. That's great. So, so I think sometimes we struggle with specifics, like what exactly does this mean? And I just wrote down 2 of them, and maybe you could comment on both of these. One is following up after an event. What does follow up really mean? What does it look like? Bronwyn, you mentioned developing your network. What practically happens when you're doing that? Maybe you could give us some examples of both of those points.
Sure. So with the developing your network, I had to live and breathe that. I had been out of Australia for 13 years. I had a really strong network that I adored, to be honest, overseas. And I came back to Australia and I had to start from scratch again. 13 years is a lifetime to be away when people are going about their everyday lives. So there are a couple of things I did, and it was the first was reconnecting with people that I had known, like quite a bit of time had passed, but just, approaching them and saying, I'm back, here I am, what's happening in your life? This is what I'm doing. Who do you know that might be interested in what I'm doing? I work as a consultant across different law firms. So checking back in with people who I knew were in law firms or who worked with law firms was really important. But the other thing was to seek out people who have a similar interest to me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I started looking around. I knew I looked at what I liked about my network that I had, and I wanted to find people who had similar drivers. I was lucky enough to, and I knew I wanted people also outside of Brisbane, because I think it's important to have a broad network and find out what's happening in other places. So there is a program that's run here by a fantastic group called Women on Boards, and they select people from across Australia. There's about 25 people every year. And I applied for that, and I was lucky enough to be in the cohort. There was about 30 people, and I met 30 remarkable women and numerous leaders of companies, etc., through that program. It was completely left field for me. I don't have a desire to be on boards, but it connected me into people across industries, and I have now a great cohort in my network from that group, and they've made introductions to other people. I can ring them up when I have a question. I have a safe environment to say, well, how would you do this, in a good testing group? So it's putting yourself outside of the lawyer realm as well, like not just restricting yourself to lawyers, but look at who else you know that's outside that realm. The other thing I would say is, if you are a younger lawyer, connect with people all the way through. When I look at the cohort I went through with, there is only one of them that is still a lawyer. Another works in education, another's in technology, in banks, another is overseas working in oil and gas. Like, if you maintain and keep up contact, and it's never been done through this is going to help me in the future. I'm just interested and curious about people and how their lives unfold. So having that sort of curiosity about the people around you, I definitely find helps in building your network. So if you start from a position of curiosity and you make the effort to maintain contact, I think that's a really big help in building that network around you.
I just want to interject something on this point, and it's something that I know myself personally, but I also heard it in another session today, and that is to pay attention to what people say when you ask them how they are. Make notes. Make notes and remember the things that are important to them, so that when you circle back in 2 months to see what's up with them, that you can show that you had genuine interest and that you retained some of what they told you. And that keeps it from being just a rote mechanical action. I was going to ask Catriona about follow-up, because you mentioned your incredibly successful webinars with 300 attendees, and what does how could an individual lawyer follow up with people that may have come to a firm-sponsored event?
Well, I'll start by saying that I'm quite lucky I've got a team of 6 in business development, and I have some juniors who are very good with the technical side and facilitate the follow-up as well. And so what we really do is we, in actually setting up the webinar, at the moment and I think it was Bronwyn mentioned earlier that there's so much content out there and so much white noise, so much going on. With our webinars, we're making sure that we're dealing with an issue that is timely to our clients and it's impacting them now. So it really relates to something that they need to deal with and that they're being challenged with. And in some cases, it might be interim legislation that's been put in place for the period of the pandemic, which is going to determine how they operate or how they deal with particular type of constituents. So with all of our webinars, we have a presentation component, and then we're allowing quite a significant Q&A component, because we are getting a lot of questions through Zoom. If they're entered through the Q&A function, it tells us we can actually export that out afterwards, and we know who's asked what questions. So we can actually follow up with them directly. We have a process after where we go and ask for feedback and suggestions as to additional topics. So we'll follow up on that as well. And we know everybody who's attended, and particularly those that have asked questions, we will allocate different lawyers to follow up with different people, particularly if we weren't able to get to a question during the session. So it's very much a very deliberate process, and we try and get as many people involved as we possibly can, and we try and have a number of team members on the webinar as well that are not necessarily presenting, but they can hear the conversation and the concerns of clients, and so afterwards can be part of the contingent that are following up with clients.
Great, great. Let me ask this. What's the most creative thing that you've seen that's either your firm has done or that you've seen maybe elsewhere in your industry for connecting in a meaningful way with clients during the pandemic? We had some interesting comments about this earlier in a session today, and I'm curious what you're seeing in Colombia and in Australia, and maybe Pablo, you can go first.
Actually, it's called my attention that I've seen many young lawyers that are not working in firms, but they are starting like their own firm. They're making YouTube videos on different topics, 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, about how to create a company here in Colombia. Very straight points, right to the point, and at the end, just give us a call, and this is my webpage, and they attend everything through the webpage, in a very fast way. I find it very
interesting.
Very interesting. It is.
Wow, great. Who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in. It's a little bit different. It was more a client, thank you. And I have to admit, this was not my idea, but I completely stole it. There's a wonderful company here. I'm trying to think what it's called now. I think it's called Fantastic Balloons, and they fill helium balloons. They put confetti inside them. It has a wonderful message of thank you or something across the front, and it arrives in a huge big box. And if you don't know what's inside that box, there's that great moment of almost, a Christmas morning of childhood times where you open this box and out pops this beautiful balloon. And in times where, days have been long and dreary, that has been just sending one of those just to say to somebody, hey, I'm thinking of you and I hope everything's going well, has had a great response. Just something out of the blue that wasn't necessarily expected or worked really well.
Catriona, do you want to add something?
I feel like we've pivoted with technology rather than creative ideas, but along the lines of what Bronwyn was talking about is some of our lawyers have participated, and maybe it's that some of our referral networks and our clients might be a little bit more creative than what we are, but where they've done like cheese and wine nights, and they'll send out wine to the different participants and do a wine tasting. And it's via Zoom, but everyone's got the same wine and can participate and talk about it all, whether it's cheese or you can do it with cocktails and various different things. And so we've had really good interactions via those sorts of things. And it's just a slightly different, rather than having a wine expert in the office and being able to do that face-to-face, sending it out to people and getting engagement on those sorts of things, because that also, having something like whether it's wine or cheese, it gives you something to talk about and to get the conversation going as well. Because I've even found with my team, when we have social catch-ups, it can get to that point where the conversation sort of starts to peter out and you're sort of like, okay, how do we politely finish this without it getting too awkward? So having something like that to talk about can really help to carry the conversation through.
So we have a good and broad representative of firms on this call, and I'd like to also ask to please, if you've got questions and we have experts on our call, please ask questions. But also, if you have an idea of something creative that you've seen work in your market that we could cross pollinate on, please raise your hand or unmute and just jump in, because we'd love to hear what you've seen work in your environment as well. Let me ask a little bit about where marketing butts up against business development. So we've talked a lot about sort of traditional marketing techniques like that are content driven, whether it's webinars or blogs or even to some extent the YouTube idea is delivering content to build an image of expertise. And then there's the follow-up. And then hopefully you've got something that then takes you into the realm of active business development. And so what can you tell me about how that process has changed in the pandemic, and what you might recommend for someone who's more introverted in making that jump from, you've attended my webinar, or you've read my blog post, or I remembered your birthday on LinkedIn because we went to law school together. How can you transition that into something that is the developing of actual business?
I'll jump in and have a shot at this one, Wendy. Look, I think one of the most important things is when you're making that transition, to be really honest that you're there because you want to win their work. I know there's often lots of training around, well, go and have a coffee with them. And people go and have a coffee and they sort of ask about family and what's happening. Are you going on holidays? Where, that sort of thing. But there isn't that fundamental question or discussion around, well, I'd really like to do some work with you. And it can become quite awkward. And so if you don't have that conversation, the person you've made contact with knows that's what you're there for. It just drifts away into awkwardness. So it's really important to know how you're going to approach that and how you're going to open up that conversation. You both know that's what you're there for. Yes, you want to get to know that person better and you want to share a bit about yourself, but you absolutely have to have that conversation, because if you don't have that conversation and you ask them again for a coffee, if that's eventually they're going to say no, and that's going to become a cold lead for you. So if you need help in having those conversations, reach out to your BD or marketing person, because they have lots of tips and tricks around that. But absolutely go into that coffee or whatever the follow-up is, knowing that ultimately you want to come out either knowing how you can get some work for them or what they need to know about you to be able to consider you for work in the future.
I think further to that, Bronwyn, it's really important, and I quite often get people coming to me saying, I've got a client meeting, can I have a capability statement? And I'll just say, no, go and ask questions, find out what your clients need. So just going and asking a lot of questions around what are their key business issues that they're struggling with at the moment, what's keeping them awake at night, you know, how's their team going, what are the challenges that they're finding working from home. Does their team need any training in particular areas that we could help out with? So I send lawyers 10 questions to go and ask their clients, and then once they've had the conversation with their clients, we can come up with some tailored marketing collateral that they can use as a follow-up to that conversation that really shows that we're thinking about what they need rather than just telling them what we do. So it's actually meeting their needs rather than just trying to sell our expertise.
Great, excellent point.
I totally agree. Is just with everything you guys have said, is basically we need to do anything to be on our client's radar, talking to them, giving them a call, sending an email, sending them a legal update for a certain needs that you saw that they probably have. Be on their radar.
Very good. Let me ask this, with maybe a little bit more capacity and clients having a greater willingness to receive content or entertain meetings or have calls or be on Zoom, how do you stand out? How do you make your content or your outreach distinctive? And what have you seen? What would you advise that works in that area?
I guess what I would say is talking to them about issues that are timely and that are impacting their business now. That's the key for us. And when we, even prior to the pandemic, when we looked at the market analytics behind some of who's reading our alerts and attending our webinars, we have found that it is those ones that if there's something going on, in Australia, we have for people that have lost their job due to the pandemic, Job Seeker and Job Keeper, which are fortnightly payments that can help sort of tide them over until they either go back to their old role or find another job. And there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that companies need to know about how their people can access those and how they sort of would participate in those programs. And so talking to them about that at the time to help them get up to speed and ensure that they're adhering to this new regulatory process is really important, and that's when we get the greatest engagement.
Great, good point. Bronwyn, how do we stand out?
Everybody has already picked up that probably that I have a slant to the client and being in front of the client, and I think I also come at that from an alert and update point of view. I will challenge you to say, how much time is it going to take you to write this, and what's the, how many people are going to read it at the end of the day? Why don't you first invest that time in actually calling your clients, call the 5 clients that it really impacts and talk through why you are talking to them about that. and then write your alert, because you then have a broader view of what's happening and more information from your clients about how it's impacting them. So you can end up, if you write that client alert for those 5 clients and send it out, it will hopefully appeal and it'll resonate more with the clients that do get it. One of the things that I've heard said, which I totally agree with, is that if you write for everybody, you write for no one. So when you sit down to write that client alert, have that client in mind that this is really going to impact. And then once it's written, as well as sending it out by EDM or posting it on the website, pick 10 clients that it really impacts and send them a personal note about why you are sending it to them and why you think it impacts them. I've heard through client feedback sessions, one of the best lines I ever heard was, I only ever read a client alert when it comes from a particular lawyer, because he will always explain to me first why I need to read it. So I know if it's come directly from him, then he has taken the time to consider why it matters to me. And I think that's really important. And then it's, getting it out and checking your analytics. Always make sure you've got the SEO behind it for people to find it if they're searching for that on the internet, and also that it's on your social media platforms.
Pablo, what would you add?
Here, for example, when the pandemic started in the month of March, everybody started doing some webinars every single day. And there was a point where people didn't want to go to many webinars, just way too many. And people were saturated from Zoom. So what we started to do is basically we segmented our database and we started to create specific content. For example, everything related with labor and law, we send them only to the human resources managers of different companies here in Colombia. Everything related with M&A transaction during the pandemic, we took information from the IBA, from different sources, and we created legal alerts, and we sent them only to the financial vice presidents. So we started to segment the information, and I think that had very good impact, and also helped us to position the brand within not only the legal department, but also with the human resources, with the financials, obviously with the legal vice president, also with marketing, for example, with everything related with IP. So we took different audiences and we created content specific for them, instead of having one webinar sent to everybody. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something that was mentioned earlier today was the idea that if you're writing about a substantive topic, that you either have to be first in communicating about it, or you have to have a point of view. That if you're talking about something that's a new change, but you're the 10th law firm that has sent that client an update on that topic, you better have something, a fresh take on it, a perspective or an angle or an opinion, because if you're late on the news and you're only giving them the news, then
it's not good.
You've lost an opportunity. How do you see the changes that we've been through since March? How do you see it affecting the marketing or the business development efforts longer term? Do you think that this is a fundamental shift, that the changes that we've been talking about are things that will stick, after a vaccine? What are your thoughts on how this has affected longer term marketing and business development in a law firm?
Certainly think it has opened up opportunities for us to engage with a broader audience online. But I also think that particularly where there have been significant lockdowns, we have a greater appreciation of that human connection and the seeing people face to face. And I know in Melbourne, we're looking at how we can start bringing people back into the office in a staged manner as the government allows us to over the next couple of months. And people are really keen, not to just get back and see their clients, but see their colleagues and be able to collaborate again. So I think we will go back to having those one-on-one, face-to-face events, but I think they'll be augmented by some of the technology that we've had to adopt during this period.
Pablo, Bronwyn?
Well, I think it's really hard because no one knows what's going to happen. But I think my perception is very close to what Catriona just said. People are starting to realize the importance of face-to-face meetings. And I just hope that we can have that face-to-face meetings very soon. Definitely new ways of marketing will be developed, and the digital marketing will be the point of the most important source that we can have so far. But nothing compares to the face-to-face meetings and lunches where we can talk and we can put over the table everything that we have just mentioned during the past few minutes. Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. We've been back in the office here, I think it was about the beginning of July, staggered for probably a month, and then back full time. We still have a flexibility policy, so if people want to work from home, they can, but it has been, everyone wants to be back in the office and engaging, and we're certainly seeing that with clients as well. I think it's been a fantastic reminder that at the end of the day, law is a people business. That's what we're in.
So we have a question from our audience, which is, should I have a Twitter account? And is Twitter useful for lawyers?
I think that Twitter, it's a very good tool, but it requires of a lot of attention, because one of the points of success of a Twitter account is that you generate a lot of content and start tweeting it as soon as it comes out, and also the people that you follow and follows you, you have to invest a lot of time, not only in the Twitter account. The same will happen within your LinkedIn profile or any professional profile that you have. But Twitter is the point, that the bridge that will take you to your blog or to your firm webpage, and it has to have a lot of movement.
Bronwyn or Catriona, you both have, I think, lawyers in your firm who have Twitter accounts, in addition to your firm having Twitter accounts. What do you think on this point?
We see it as complementary to the marketing that we're doing. So if we send out an alert, we'll share it on Twitter and LinkedIn. If we send out an event invitation, or if we're acknowledging a particular, might be Remembrance Day, or it might be some sort of, it's Trans Awareness Week this week, and so we've done a social media post about that, and so we'll do those kinds of things on social media. We don't use it in isolation. We use it to augment what we're already doing, and we encourage our people across various different social media platforms to share firm initiatives with their broader network.
Great.
Completely agree with what both people have said, both panelists have said. It can eat up so much time. So if you are experimenting with social media, find one platform and do it really well, and then work out, and also be very, very aware of your firm's social media policies. Just a tip.
Very good. So when you look at what's ahead, how your firm spends money marketing, what your budgets are like. If you, in the past, maybe you had a big expense of sporting tickets, or taking people out to dinner, or certainly traveling to see people in other parts of the world. And those monies have been repurposed, or maybe they've just been saved. But what's happened to the way that the firm spends money on marketing and business development? And if I'm an introverted lawyer, what can I do with my, well, in the States we call it T&E. It's the travel and entertainment budget, because I can travel and my entertainment is limited. How can someone make good use of that sort of expense in this time?
We've certainly seen, as you can imagine, a massive shift in the way people are doing business development. So there aren't the face-to-face lunches. We're not having people into our offices. So when we do a webinar, we're not paying for sandwiches for everybody. And so there are significant savings. What we have been doing is, I think that we're a bit more rigorous in the way that we manage our partnerships with industry associations. There's a number of benefits that you get out of them. Some are purely branding, some are networking opportunities, some are profile building. And so we're probably talking to those associations almost on a weekly or fortnightly basis to make sure that we are continuing to get the benefits from those. We certainly haven't reduced our budgets, but we're not spending what we normally would, and we're, I guess, seeing that as a good thing at the moment, and hopefully there will be, once we get to a point where we're feeling safe and able to again, people will be able to start doing some of the face-to-face BD again. So we are sort of maintaining the budgets even if we're not spending them right now.
Great.
And I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting, Wendy. I know from feedback from clients and certainly lawyers as well, pre-COVID, there was certainly a fair bit of fatigue around the entertainment. You know, clients, there's only a pool of clients. There's a lot of law firms now and they get invited to a lot of things. So finding something that was really unique and people wanted to attend had become more and more challenging. So it will be interesting to see where that lands as people go back. You know, will they still want to do the more unique things, or will it be a broader, we just want to see people again? So having some thought around that and what will appeal to people, and asking clients, what do you want to do? How do you think it's going to change?
Anything to
Same
add
here.
to that? Okay.
Same here. We're not spending as much as we could be doing it, but we're keeping the budget for next year so that hopefully we can use it with everything you mentioned, sporting tickets or concerts or dinners in restaurants or travel to see to see clients not only here in Colombia but in other countries, and meeting with you guys in your cities. We hopefully we can use it next year.
So we have just a couple of minutes. We have another question from the audience. With pitches, are you having to do different things with fees to get clients interested in actually accepting a proposal? Are you finding that how you approach that part of a pitch has changed with the pandemic?
I think it's very related, very close related with what we mentioned of speaking with the clients constantly, knowing how they are, giving them a call, sending emails, and with every call, with many of the calls that partners are making, they always have an opportunity to send a proposal for anything, and we even found some M&A opportunities that one of the clients wanted to invest in another, so there was an M&A transaction. Opportunities are there. We just have to look for them.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And I think from
sorry, you go, Bronwyn.
I was just going to say, I don't know that certainly people are more cost conscious. Clients are more cost conscious since COVID, but there was already a movement towards that. There was a push towards alternate fees. There was a push towards fixed fees. So maybe it has moved that along a bit faster than it would have, but I think that movement was already happening and we were having to find innovative ways and to work with and collaborate with clients around pricing.
And I think a key part of that, Bronwyn, is around managing their expectations and there not being any surprises. So the cost consciousness and making sure that if we've given them a fixed fee, that we meet that fixed fee rather than cost going over. So I think it, for some clients, has brought some more rigour around that. And I guess we would also see some sensitivities in various sectors that have been impacted more greatly than others around their